Let's bring in Mel Kiper Jr., draft expert with the mothership, was in Indianapolis at the Combine. And you can tweet him at Mel Kiper, ESPN. Mel, how are you?
Dan, great to be with you, pal.
Well, I got a couple of things to start with. First of all, if you didn't do this job, what would you be doing?
Wow, that's a great question, Dan. If I didn't do this, what would I be doing? Well, I had a chance back in 1983 to go to work for the Baltimore Colts, so that didn't work out because the Colts were moving, and Ernie Accorsi was going to bring me in, was going to be leaving. So had that not happened the way it did, I would have been in the NFL and never at ESPN because I got the call to go up and interview for the ESPN draft job 5 months later. So that would have never happened. Had Ernie Accorsi not had my best interest at heart at that time, would have never been at ESPN. And probably, who knows what would have happened, Dan? So initially, I would have been in the NFL had things gone the way it was supposed to go. Okay, then the ESPN call came. So then the rest is history. We say if none of that would have happened, I thought I always grew up as wanting to get into meteorology, be a meteorologist. So I always loved the weather and the study of the weather. So I would have thought at the time, Dan, as a young kid, meteorology would have been my field.
You have weathercaster hair. And that's important in TV.
Very versatile, right there.
Yes. It looks great.
Yeah. I don't know about that. It's lost a lot over the years, Dan, believe me.
First Combine you've ever been to? Is that right?
Yes. The first year we were allowed into the Combine, where we were allowed total access in, or I should say access in general, in to watch it. And it was a nice experience to be in there. You see it, and then obviously you get all the numbers. So we always had access that way in terms of getting everything we needed, which were the actual printouts of the numbers and knowing everything from the vertical jumps, the broad jumps, the three-cone, all that stuff we had. But to be in there and watch it, and we were able to interview, Andy Reid, Jerry Jones came over to the set. A lot of individuals were there around, and you could talk to people. So it was good from that standpoint. To watch it live was good. So, yeah, it was a productive, I think, week in Indianapolis.
How much do you rely on other people's information when you formulate your opinions with your draft board, and how much is it just you?
The opinions of the ratings are just me. The mock draft is that's always been the misnomer, Dan. Well, you relies on this. That's all I do is watch football all year. And I start back in August with the big board. That's based on nobody has a board back in then. What we do, and I put that together all year, updated every other week. So every 2 weeks it's updated based on the way kids are playing. Write about them on ESPN.com every week. So all the ratings you see, Dan, have nothing to do with the way the NFL is thinking things are going to go. The mock drafts are always trying to figure out what you're hearing, things like that. And so the mock draft is it's useful for that purpose, for the mock draft information, not for the ratings. The ratings have nothing to do with what you're told by NFL people because that's their opinion. Your opinion will differ. If you have a fifth rounder that you're seeing something you're not seeing what they're seeing, you go back to the drawing board and say, boy, I missed that. Okay, I didn't know that. So then you can adjust things based on they're the experts. They have more information than anybody. They know everything medical. They have access to more than we do. So you have to adjust somewhat if you're way off. But other than that, Dan, no. The mock draft is the only reason why I would talk to them about that type of thing.
10 years ago, how would you assess Dwayne Haskins and how would you assess Kyler Murray?
10 years ago, Kyler Murray would have been probably a slot receiver or just a fifth-round draft pick, fourth-round draft pick maybe if it was 10 years. Think about 7 years ago, Dan. Russell Wilson was 5'10" and a half and 205, 210 pounds and ran a 4.5 40 and had a great career at both NC State and Wisconsin. It was the 75th pick, a third-round draft choice. And that was 7 years ago. You fast forward to today, and Kyler Murray's in line to maybe be the number one pick overall. So I said over the weekend that Kyler Murray owes a call of thanks to Russell Wilson because that was the test case. We said it then, Dan, and I'll say it again now. Russell Wilson was the test case for quarterbacks, not 6 foot because Michael Vick was 6 foot. Drew Brees was 6 foot. Baker Mayfield. So we've had 6 foot We've never had this where a successful quarterback. Now go back to Fran Tarkington days is different. Yeah. Doug Flutie never had a chance to be drafted. He went into the USFL prematurely, but the Russell Wilson opened the door for Kyler Murray to be the number one pick overall.
If you ran the Cardinals, ... what would you do?
Yeah, I think you have to take Kyler Murray and trade Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen doesn't fit. And I think Josh Rosen, to me, would be the number one quarterback in this draft if he were in this draft, okay? He would be the number one quarterback. So say what you want about Josh Rosen. He had a decent year considering he had nothing to work with in Arizona and the worst offensive line in the NFL. And to me, if you're the Giants, if you're the Dolphins, if you're the Redskins, I've heard people say second, third round pick for Rosen. I don't know what they're thinking. If I'm a team, I'm giving a first round pickup for Josh Rosen. If he's available, and I don't know if he's going to be available. We don't know what Arizona's thinking about this. You heard Steve Keim say for now he's our quarterback, whatever. Cliff Kingsbury being the coach is the dynamic, Dan, that allows Kyler Murray to be in play at number one. He fits what they're going to do. They're not going to do the max protect. You need a quarterback that's mobile. You're behind the line. It should be a little better. It can't be any worse than last year. That was the worst offensive line in the league. So you can't have Rosen. Rosen doesn't fit Kingsbury. Kyler Murray does. They have the number one pick, and they get back a mid-first round pick by trading Josh Rosen, and then they're on their way to helping that football team. So I would take, if I were them, based on the Kingsbury factor, I would take, and also the fact that Steve Keim, when you talk to people, they say, hey, Steve Keim didn't have Josh Rosen as number one quarterback, or maybe even the number two quarterback. Josh Allen was evidently their number one. That's what you hear. Whether it's true or not, it's debatable, but that's what you hear. So I would think Kyler Murray would make sense there at number one.
I've been saying all along, I'm on the Kyler Murray bandwagon. It's a new era with quarterbacks and how they're protected and, how you utilize them. But I also have to look at this if I'm the Cardinals. And, yes, I did watch Cardinal football games last year. And you're right, that's one of the worst offensive lines I've seen in recent memory. And Josh Rosen really didn't have a chance to shine. But if I'm Arizona, don't I at least kick the tires on the Raiders doing something stupid and going up and giving you a couple of first-round draft picks? Maybe you get 3 first-round draft picks for the opportunity to go up to number 1 or 2, and then you get their 4th pick overall. Doesn't that make more sense for the Cardinals, or is Kyler Murray that good you can't pass up on him?
Well, that's what they have to determine. And I understand about the John Gruden factor with Kyler Murray. He was the one that loved Russell Wilson. And, of course, he has Derek Carr. And that's the thing there. Derek Carr, just a couple of years ago, as you know, Dan, as well as anybody, is almost an MVP guy. He was an MVP guy. And, he can throw the ball. And this whole notion that he just is dink and dunk. Well, you got to be dink and dunk when you have an offensive line that's struggling with injuries along the interior, 2 rookie tackles, one of which was from North Carolina A&T, the other of which, Colton Miller, is going to be good, but he played injured most of the year. And the receivers, you traded away your main entity. So what did you expect Derek Carr to do? He had to get the ball out of his hand, okay? He had no choice. He can throw the ball down the field and extend things. He's got a big arm. So I think Derek Carr moving forward looks like he'll be the Raider quarterback. But if that was offered, fine, you'll listen. But if you're number 1 in your Arizona, that's what you have to think about. Is this offense going to be better with Josh Rosen, or is it going to be better with Kyler Murray? It seems like, and you heard Kingsbury's comments about Murray when he was at Texas Tech, but I think now it all gets down to who is best. It's all about system. It's all about fit, Dan, in sports. You know that. Yeah. Teams go to – it's all about supporting it, but more fit, system fit. Who does that the best? And that would be Kyler Murray. Oh, and that's no criticism of Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen, with those teams that I mentioned, would be better, I think, than drafting any quarterback in this draft if Murray goes 1. So if you're Miami, Washington, would you rather have Drew Lock, Daniel Jones, Lock from Missouri, Jones from Duke, or would you rather have Josh Rosen? I'd want Josh Rosen by a mile.
Yeah, I would too. We're talking to Mel Kiper, the ESPN draft expert. Tom Brady told me, it was a few years ago, if he had gone in the first round, he'd probably be out of the league, that he sort of needed to absorb a system, and, it just worked out. Yeah, the injury to Drew Bledsoe. Looking back, do you remember what you even thought of Brady? And do you believe that if he had gone in the first round, he would have been out of the league by now?
Well, what Tom said, I think a lot of quarterbacks have echoed those same sentiments. What if Dan Marino, instead of going to Miami, would have gone to the Detroit Lions at, say, pick 13, whatever it was that year, or a little earlier in the draft, where Todd Blackledge went to Kansas City? Who knows what would have happened? As we always say, Dan, history would have been rewritten if certain things didn't fall into place. If Drew Brees goes to Miami instead of Dante Culpepper, Nick Saban's never coaching Alabama, and they don't win all these championships. He stays at Miami because they're winning with Drew Brees more than likely. So all these things affect history. There's no question question about that, Dan. But I think for Tom Brady, when you go back, and I looked at his write-up because I wrote him up. I talked about him on draft day. Yeah, he had all the components from a passing standpoint and a competitive standpoint. He just had the 5.24, 5.28 40, which was the slowest 40 time of any quarterback I've ever written up, and the worst vertical at 24.5 inches of any quarterback I had written up. So, again, measurables for quarterbacks mean nothing. We know that, Dan, and it proved out with Tom Brady. He's the test case for that. One of the best ever had 5.24, 5.28, and a 24.5 vertical. So forget about verticals and 40s for quarterbacks. They don't matter. But for Brady, he needed to go to a team that could protect him. And then he slips and slides in the pocket as well as anybody. But he had the right situation, and I think you could say that about a lot of quarterbacks. Boomer Esiason going in the second round, he was disappointed that 3 first-round picks went ahead of him, went in the second round, and it worked out well in Cincinnati for him. So, again, you can't change history, but in some cases, the way things fell looked bad on draft day, but ultimately were great for the player who dropped.
I had a scout tell me yesterday, he's a former NFL scout, and he was watching the show, listening to the show, and I was talking about the measurables at the combine, and we get caught up in the 40, and I'm not big on the 40. I'd like to know how quick you are getting to the hole or pulling guard, or if it's a defensive lineman, how quick you're off the ball. Like, quickness to me is more important than speed. But also, he said the thing that he always looked for, he wanted to know how explosive you are, and he thought the vertical jump was the most important thing at the combine. What do you make of that?
I agree. I think the broad jump, the vertical jump, the 3-cone, those quickness and agility and explosion are the most important part of it, Dan. I'll go back to Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara didn't have a great 40 time, but he had an incredible broad jump and an incredible vertical jump. So when you look at the numbers, if the numbers are bad across the board, you say, wow, look, I got to go back and really think about, is this kid just a great college player or a good college player with limited pro potential? But if you get a kid who runs a less than stellar 40, but he has the super numbers and other explosive, as you said, athletically explosive areas, then you're fine. So I think that is a very good way to look at this thing. And 40 times, let's face it, Dan, you can get a 40 time at a combine that's disappointing, and then they run it the pro day, and it's significantly better. So does that offset the combine? Because you're poked, you're prodded, you're not up at the right time, you're not getting the sleep you need, you're off schedule, Dan, these kids. You know how these kids are creatures of habit. They want to do things the same way every day. And when you get them out of their comfort zone, sometimes things don't go right. You never know. They could be a little, it's the time of the flu season. Who knows what's going on with kids? But the pro day can make amends, and then you got to put it all together. But I agree. What you said, 40 times for a lot of these players, if you look back into history, I tried to remind people that over the weekend when I gave numbers of players. I mean, Antonio Brown ran 4.56. Okay,
wow.
He only had a 33.5 vertical. I see a lot of other guys are running 4.35s, 4.4s that are struggling in the league or out of the league right now. So again, you're right that the 40 times for a lot of guys who had success, it wasn't the end all be all.
Did you take a bathroom break during the first round of the draft?
I haven't taken one yet, Dan, in 36 years at any point in the first day 1, day 2, or day 3 of the draft, which isn't good. It's not. Hey, Louis Riddick said to me the other day, because we were sitting there and they were all jumping to go to they put the show on ABC on Saturday from 1 to 3. We did a 2-hour special, and they're running. So Louis looks over and he said, Mel, that's not healthy. That's not good what you do. I said, Louis, I just when I'm locked in there, Dan, you're hooked up there. I don't want to. When I leave the set, I lose intensity and you lose kind of focus. So I just like to stay there, feel like I'm in the mode. When I'm done, I'm done. So getting up, if I don't have to get up, I don't want to get up.
Yeah, I thought you had a stadium PAL or a catheter there that,
No. Maybe next year, Dan. I might need that.
Hey, good to talk to you, Mel. Great to have you back on. We appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us.
Anytime, Dan. You're the best. Take care, pal.
That's Mel Kiper, draft expert. If you missed any of our interviews this week from the Mercedes-AMG Man Cave, go to the Dan Patrick Show app where you can watch and listen from inside the Mercedes-AMG Man Cave, Mercedes-AMG driving performance. I don't know what Mel thought of this. I should have asked him, but when I was doing SportsCenter in the mid-'90s and we would have a report from Mel Kiper, we would call him Mel Kiper, draft expert. And I'd gotten word that, don't say that about Mel. And I said, but he is Mel Kiper, draft expert. So it became this formal title for Mel Kiper. And if his name to us was Mel Kiper, draft expert. As if Mel Kiper was his first name and draft expert was his last. But I love the passion. And it goes back to what I've talked about with there are certain insiders and their passion. Like Tim Kirchin, no matter what happens in the game of baseball, will tell you something positive about it. Peter Gammons would always try to tell you something positive. Dickie V. Like, they're always looking for, because it's their sport or their sports. And the same with Mel. Mel has passion. It's there. And that's the first thing that leaves you. Passion. The energy to want to do it. And Mel still has that after, 36 years. Pretty incredible.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.